From one clown in the box, me, to another, take a peek. Comrades, hide your wife and yo kids. I was told to say it that way. Load up the shotguns and take a spot in the closet. Socialism's a-coming. But really, let's think about that. Is socialism really that big bad wolf some pea-brains are making it out to be? Former congressional candidate and anti-war Iraq veteran Michael Preisner joins us from Los Angeles, and so too does Nikki Karakawa, who is a libertarian political analyst. I hope I got all of that correct with both of you. Thank you, both of us, for joining us. So I'm going to start with you, Mr. Preisner. Socialism. Is socialism really this big bad wolf that America seems to think it is?
Well, I think it is a big bad wolf to a very small group of people. Maybe that 1% of people sitting at the top that control over 50% of the wealth in the richest country in the world. To them, socialism is a very scary and very dangerous thing because it proposes really the only solution to the crisis we're in and the only solution to the suffering that so many working people are dealing with today. And that's taking the vast wealth of this country out of the hands of the people who do absolutely no work and just simply own everything and putting it in the hands of the people that actually create that wealth.
Okay, I'm going to turn to Nikki Karakawa now, who is sitting right here, right across the way from me. There was a poll that was recently released that said that 92% of Americans, whether they're Republicans or Democrats or Tea Partiers, young and old, 92% actually prefer the Swedish model of government, socialism, I guess, a much more maybe a muted form of socialism. And they said that they prefer that. It didn't matter what sort of socioeconomic class they came from. Do you have a response to that?
Yeah, I would correct you on that.
Yeah, please.
It was that 92% of respondents in a poll from 2005 said that they would prefer a model with more income equality than the current U.S. system. I would also, to go back to your earlier point, I would say that 6 out of 10 Americans, according to a 2010 January Gallup poll, actually have an unfavorable opinion of socialism. So it's not just that top 1%.
But I want to challenge you on that.
Yeah.
Do Americans, and I think this might be a very central question, do Americans really know what socialism is, though?
I do think people do, and I think, yeah, they had a very unfavorable opinion of that. They had a more favorable opinion of capitalism. They had a favorable opinion of entrepreneurship, of small businesses, of things that are fundamental to our current capitalist system. But to get back to your earlier point about the poll that said people prefer a system with more income equality than we currently have. It actually was, aside from the fact that it was a poll from 5 years ago, not really a very well-designed model. They polled 5,000 people online, and there was a lot of questions about online polling as opposed to, by phone or in person. But what they did is they had 3 pie charts that they asked people to take a look at. One that was divided the quintiles into exact 20%, 20%, 20% distribution. One that was like a Swedish model where it was a little bit more equal, but it was about 40% of going towards the top quintile, et cetera. And then the current U.S. system. And they said, if you were placed randomly, if you knew you could be placed randomly in either the poorest or the most wealthy sector or anything in between, what would you prefer to live in? And I think there's a big difference in that. It's not what system do you prefer. Yeah, it was a.
The trick was in the questioning. That's what you're saying.
Exactly. If we go back to and you ask people, would you prefer to live in a society where your top income bracket is 60%, you face a 25% VAT, and your average take-home pay is $13,000 versus a system where your income tax, the top bracket is 35%, there is no VAT, and your average take-home pay is $20,000, which would you prefer? That's a much different question. So I think it's comparing apples to oranges.
You're absolutely making my head spin. Mr. Preisner, I'm going to go to you at this point and talk about and ask you if you had any sort of reaction with what Ms. Karakawa said at this point about socialism.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's irrelevant to question the validity of the poll because the reality is really right in front of our faces. We're living in a time now, there was just a study released that came out today, I believe, that showed that the income gap between the richest and poorest people in the United States is bigger than it's ever been in the history of the United States of America. We're living in a time now where so many people are becoming unemployed. The so-called economic recovery is still yielding job losses every single month, record foreclosures, a country where the #1 cause of bankruptcy is from hospitals hospital bills, and the majority of those people have health insurance. A country where over 1 million children a year are homeless. This is the richest country in the world. Stockpiles of medicine are destroyed because they can't be sold at a profit while they're sick people. Entire crops of food are burned to the ground because to keep the price of food high while they're starving people. I mean, it's very obvious to so many people that this is a completely absurd system in the richest country of the world, that there's so much suffering, there's so much hardship, at a time when people really are looking for solutions. And really, I think people don't have an idea of what socialism is, because in this poll, what I think reflected is that people recognize that there's this great divide between the rich and the poor. There's this great divide between people who work every single day of their life, between people who struggle to make ends meet, and then a small group of people that own the products of our labor, that squander it on wars, that squander it on bank bailouts. Well, socialism says that the working people, the people of this country, should be able to decide how that vast wealth is spent. The bailouts alone, which is over $11 trillion right now, if just $1 trillion of those dollars was spent on meeting people's needs, like I think many people would agree with, you could provide every single person with free health care in this country. You could provide every single person with a free college education in this country. Really, I think the realities are right in front of our faces, that the capitalist system simply does not work. Not only does it not work, but it's a completely absurd, cruel, and inhumane system. And there's only one alternative to that economic system, and that's a system that's based on meeting human need, not based on making the most amount of profits for a very small group of people.
Okay, now I'm going to, Ms. Kurok, I could see you. I mean, I could see the daggers in your eyes coming popping up now, and you're unsheathing that sword. I want to ask you for a reaction to what Mr. Preisner had just said, but I want to go ahead and also, if we could bring that up, a quote that I had come across by somebody who actually lives in a socialist system. He says, "Politically, I'm a caring capitalist, but my only affiliation is to whatever works. Ideologies give me the creeps." So what that's saying is, look, socialism, I mean, yeah, by name it may not be a great idea, I mean, based on its affiliations and what you may think of socialism, but based on what's going on right now, as Mr. Preisner even said, it doesn't seem to work, and therefore, let's just go with what works. Do you have a response to him and that quote?
I love that Mr. Preisner brought up the fact that pharmaceuticals are being destroyed and that crops are being destroyed, because what was the reason that we stockpiled all those flu vaccines last year? It was the government. The government ordered that. The government, through its farm subsidies, ends up paying farmers more than their crops actually are worth. So I would point to the fact that actually government intervention doesn't work. That's what I would say. And to be honest, once you start asking the American people, how exactly do you want to solve this, they're not comfortable with the government intervening more. The Rasmussen reports did a poll in September 2010, and they asked, would you prefer a larger government that offers more services or a smaller government with lower taxes that offers fewer services? And 70% of respondents said that they would prefer a smaller government.
But couldn't it be the case that the American people really don't know what they want?
Well, I think, once you start looking at systems that have tried more extensive welfare states. Actually, today, The Economist and the BBC came out with a poll that showed that across the board, people would prefer services cut as opposed to higher taxes to address budget deficits across the board. That's in Britain, that's in France, that's in Brazil, that's here. There was not one country that would prefer higher taxes. So I think, and then also I'd like to go back to something that Fidel Castro had said the other week. The system isn't working. And that's, that's out of the mouth of babes.
Out of the mouth of babes. Mr. Preisner, I'm going to go ahead and have you have this word at this point.
Sure. Well, first of all, Fidel's statement was taken completely out of context in the way that she's referring to. But I would say I'm actually kind of surprised to hear someone saying that free market capitalism is the answer and less government intervention is the answer, because I think we saw in the financial crisis in 2008, if it wasn't for the biggest government intervention ever, the largest transfer of wealth ever in human history in the sum of over $11 trillion in these bank bailouts, the entire financial sector would have completely collapsed. The banks would have completely collapsed. Capitalism was teetering on the edge, and it was only large-scale government intervention that saved it. So we have to ask ourselves, since it's obvious that large-scale government intervention is the only thing that's keeping a system up, is it going to be large-scale government intervention to benefit the richest people, the Wall Street corporations, the banks, or are we going to have large-scale government intervention that's going to benefit the vast majority of people, working people, the people that actually create this wealth, that created the $11 trillion that was spent to bail out the banks, that created the over $500 million a day that's spent on the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. I think if you'd ask most people in this country, they'd want that money to be spent on things that benefit them. And I think it's also completely absurd to say that most people would rather have social services slashed and a budget slashed instead of having taxes raised. I mean, people that have been affected by these budget cuts, we're not just talking about people who are having to pay a little more. We're talking about people who are dying, people who are losing AIDS treatment. We're talking about students that no longer have access to a college education. I mean, we're talking about people that no longer have access to quality health care. People are dying because of these budget cuts. These budget cuts very literally are killing. These wars that are aimed at nothing for profit are killing innocent people every day, many more U.S. soldiers every single day. I think that every single facet of this economic system that you point to, it shows how criminal it is and how absurd it is and how terrible it is for the vast majority of people. I think that there is only one solution to this crisis that we're in. As we continue to see job losses every single month, as we continue to see these wars rage on, as we continue to see people die because they don't have access to health care, as we continue to see people, young people who are completely cut off from a college education, the solution is the money is out there. There is plenty of money in this country to provide the things that we need, to provide people with a home, with a job, with health care, with an education. There's plenty of money, but the problem is it's owned by a very, very tiny group of people who do nothing but use that money to make more and more profits for themselves. Well, I say we create the wealth. We should decide how it's spent.
All right, I'm going to leave it there. I know you want to hit back, but we've just ran out of time. Nikki Kurokawa, a libertarian political analyst, and Michael Preisner, former congressional candidate and also a supporter of socialism. Thank you both for joining us. I'm sure we could talk about this until the cows come home and then have calves, and then those cows come home too. But anyway, thank you for joining us.